Welcome to the first edition of Compass. Since 1988, Compass has explored questions of belief, values and ethics. We've looked at the religious and the secular, the personal and the political. Welcome to a series of special programs celebrating our 21st anniversary on air. And thank you for joining me as we continue to celebrate our 21st birthday with this gem of a story. Take yourself back to the 1970s, when it seemed almost anything was possible. It was a time of great social change, of optimism, big ideals. The search was on for new ways to live, and the people you're about to meet in this story truly believed they had the answer. They gave up everything to follow their very own New Age prophet to a remote farm south of Perth. This story follows what happened to the dream and to those who lived it.
I am a child of Mother Earth. It makes my heart rejoice. We are children.
4 hours south of Perth lies a small country town that was once the centre of an extraordinary experiment. A homegrown spiritual movement that for a brief time in the 70s was Australia's most successful alternative community.
Yeah, some of these sheds are still there and haven't been developed. It's not totally developed out.
Stephen Carthew was one of its founding fathers.
And this is the turn-off. We used to have a big sign saying Universal Brotherhood. And some people just stopped at that and turned up that sign wondering, what is this? And they ended up living there. They shouldn't have stopped, but they did.
Morning sun smiling in the sky. Another new day is here. I am a child.
30 years ago, Stephen convinced nearly 200 young idealists to give up everything and put their lives in the hands of their very own New Age guru and his zealous wife.
We really believed that it was a turning point for mankind. We honestly believed that. And there was no turning back.
To most people who've never been through anything like this, they'd look at us and think, are you nuts or something?
They thought they could change the world. What came of their dreams has haunted them ever since.
If Mary had said to us, we've reached the right vibration, we don't need our bodies anymore, we're all going to drink cyanide, I wonder if we'd done it.
People allowed themselves to be controlled and manipulated. People who absolutely believed in what was happening have been lost ever since.
It makes our hearts rejoice.
'Today, the property that once housed the Universal Brotherhood is still run as a community. A loose cooperative with no religious connections.
Wow. It's quite different. Look at that. That's a lot of extra growth.
After many years,
Wow.
Stephen's finally come back.
The old homestead. And here we are. It's changed a bit because the house has been renovated, but still very much here. Wow. Hey, Mark. How are you?
Looking about the same as always.
Yeah. Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Stephen's here to write the definitive history of the Brotherhood, to try and preserve something of the paradise they built and lost.
Does it look anything like you remember?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. So my path used to be up this line, and that's the driveway into Mary's house. And of course, we had such a vision for, you know, what could be. And when the gardens were really growing well like that, you could really feel and see how it was expanding and it was beautiful. And this is the school. This is the old schoolhouse. And my place is just down through here. This is where
What you invoke, you're responsible for. And what I invoked, in a sense, I still feel a sense of responsibility. And so that sense of responsibility is now getting the story straight and getting the story out.
News of Stephen's visit has spread through the community, and he's been asked to speak about the little-known days of the Brotherhood.
There's a lot of things that weren't easy and a lot of mistakes that I made, or I can look back and see that we made as a group. But I can't sort of say that I'm sorry that we tried and that and I'm actually really proud of the fact that we did create this community.
But not everyone's here for a lecture. Some former followers have come along, and they're about to take the meeting in an unexpected direction.
And it really used to upset me about the fact that Mary used to have dreams and say God spoke to her in dreams, and then everybody had to do what Mary said because of some bloody dream she had. That is weird stuff. Well, yeah, of course I'm upset because Stephen's here talking to us like he did 30 years, so he's recreating it all over again, isn't he?
Actually, that's really unfair. I went through a lot of the things that you're talking about, and I can relate to some of it. But I'm trying to give a historical perspective, not an emotional perspective to this, although emotions are very much part of it.
But these emotions have been simmering for years.
And so we tried to... Bye-bye.
You can't shut me up, Stephen. And I don't care if I am emotional. I'm allowed to be emotional, even if it's 30 years later, you know? You're trying to stop me from talking like you did in the community. I was one of the outspoken people. OK, and there's a lot of repressed stuff within me because he tried to shut me up and control me the whole time. He separated me from my husband when I was pregnant and I nearly had a breakdown, put me on a silence fast and made me look after myself, you know. And I'm sorry. I'm here to get over all of that stuff, and you are full of shit, Stephen.
You know what?
And it was a lot of hocus-pocus, mumbo-jumbo, you know, and don't you tell me to shut up anymore.
Susan, I haven't told you.
You did. You put me down in front of everyone, and you told me to shut up like you did all those years ago. And I'm sorry if I'm emotional, if you're a socialist or a social worker or something. That's me, and this was a load of mumbo-jumbo. We had goodwill, but you were an asshole.
Tunnels of shimmering white, revolving crystals and sparkling light.
It had all begun in an era of such peace, love and harmony.
My heart finds its home in the strength of the sea.
It was 1971 and hundreds of middle-class kids were searching for a way out, turning their backs on a safe life in the suburbs. For many, it was the chance to experiment with alternative lifestyles, drugs and free love.
Oh, my name's Steve and I'm on holidays.
But a few were on a more serious path to enlightenment.
Many of us had been involved in the drug culture and we'd realised that that wasn't where we wanted to be.
Stephen Carthew came from a privileged upbringing on Sydney's North Shore. But like many others, he soon found himself on the hippie trail through India.
I'm not interested in monoculture.
At just 23, he'd come back to start Sydney's first New Age Environment Centre.
For a long while I was speculating and believing and wondering and so on, but now I don't have to believe that I breathe. I know I breathe, and it's got nothing to do with religion. It's just this cosmic point of view.
It all came together when Stephen met Fred Robinson, Australia's grand old man of organic farming. 80-year-old Fred was a self-styled eco-prophet. His mission? To guide the younger generation into a golden new age.
The truth for the first time in the history of this planet is available to all who seek and ask, no matter what it is about, from pollution, from the point of view of organic gardening, from the point of view of anything whereby man could make this a heaven upon earth instead of a hell upon earth.
He was a hippie of his generation, talking to hippies of my generation. So he was one of the few that had pioneered a path that we already wanted to take.
So Stephen and Fred joined forces. Stephen cashed in his inheritance and began selling Fred's message, calling for volunteers to pioneer a model community that could save the planet and mankind.
If we do not take constructive action in this direction, then the obvious collapse of the whole world system is becoming evident even to the man in the street.
He was convinced that the economy was about to go and that we needed to get away from the world so that we'd be economically protected. And I thought, well, this is it. This is what I was meant to do with my life, was to start a new society that would be the alternative society to mankind, and I really believed that.
Linda Ward was one of their first converts, an intense teenager desperate to escape the insular world of Sydney's northern beaches.
I was young, I was only 18, terribly idealistic. I was finishing school, not knowing what I wanted to do, didn't want to go to university, didn't want to go out and work. So I was lost and I was ripe for the picking, basically.
And so were many others. Stephen and Fred spoke at festivals around the country. Their audience included impressionable 16-year-olds like Anita Chauvin.
My father was a yoga teacher. My mother had been taking me to yoga and Jung and Theosophy and a whole lot of things since I was about 12. I left school. I'd been doing very well at school, and I think my family had a collective faint.
All we need is a good day.
By now, Stephen and Fred's crusade had reached the Maya Music Bowl in Melbourne, as their band of converts grew to include rock stars of the day.
Think about Mother Nature, then you better act right now.
You know, we just had a #1 record. And so I just sold everything up. Because, you know, #1 records weren't as important as finding out how the universe worked.
Before long, a stream of young disciples were following Fred and Stephen west. They handed over all their savings to buy 300 acres of remote farmland 4 hours south of Perth. This was to be the birthplace of a new utopia, the Universal Brotherhood.
We arrived in our combi with the seagrass matting roof, these innocent young hippies, you know, see-through clothes, free spirit floating, you know, as you do.
New age is dawning now, you can't believe it's true. We all can make it live if our hearts can feel what's true. Oh,
It was a real buzz having all these people come together with so many ideas and so much that we could do. You never know who was going to turn up tomorrow and what skills they might have. You know, one was always thinking and maybe praying for somebody to come that could do this, and then they'd turn up the next day and you'd go, wow.
Well, Fred used to get really upset. He said, I wanted carpenters and plumbers, not musicians. And I said, Fred, it's only the musicians who can understand what you're talking about. The carpenters and the plumbers don't want to know about it.
But there were a few tradesmen, like Jason Hart from Kalgoorlie, to help turn their dreams into reality.
It was basically a collection of hippie-type people. And for me, being an underground... miner, you know.
And me, I walked straight out of Melbourne, you know, in my designer clothes, with my leather jacket and my Turak hairdo, and came over.
Susan Allwood gave up a fashion career for the chance to be part of this new community.
I, lost my father when I was 12, had a fairly turbulent teenage years, and was looking for a group of people who I could trust and a group of friends, family I could belong to. And I found that.
And what was lovely about them is that these weren't the talkers, these were the doers. They weren't talking about creating a new world, they were doing it.
From a handful of pioneers, the Universal Brotherhood quickly grew to over 100 members. Within 2 years, it had become an almost completely self-sufficient community, putting into practice all its principles of biodynamic farming and holistic living.
We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord.
Those who still went out to work handed in their pay packets unopened. In exchange, the Brotherhood took care of everyone's food, shelter and clothing. Everything was shared, and everyone ate, played and prayed together.
What I liked about what Fred was offering was it wasn't just abstract ideas or one particular discipline, it was a package. So it wasn't just, meditate and do yoga. It was the entire thing. It was grow the healthy vegetables, live a certain lifestyle, do these spiritual practices, be a community, get married, have the golden children, bring in the new age.
We really believed that it was a turning point for mankind. We honestly believed that. We were creating the model that the whole world was going to be built on, you see. So we had this great responsibility to do it properly.
We call ourselves a brotherhood. And the reason we do that is that we're not an unorganised group of people come together just because we want to escape. We want to create a really pure alternative society in a world where there is a tremendous amount of pollution. We used to say it's down to earth and up to heaven, or back to the land and in tune with God. Even though the environmental and the ecological and the physical things of growing things were all important, for me this personal relationship with a God that lived inside me, around me, or however one wanted to look at it, this relationship with God was the most important aspect of it.
Every morning we used to have a group meditation, and it was a very powerful and dynamic thing because the whole emphasis of the community was to follow your inner spirit of limitless love and truth.
Tad, if you could wash the windows.
With Fred still on the road recruiting, Stephen now took on the role of preacher.
We work that we may keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth. For to be idle is to become a stranger unto the seasons, and to step out of life's procession as it marches in majesty and proud submission towards the infinite.
It was a mixed bag of mystical teachings, New Age philosophies, and surprisingly old-fashioned Christian values.
Well, there's no drugs for a start. There's no unmarried sex. This is a a convent for married people.
You know, we wore very conservative clothes covering us, you know, making sure no bikinis, girls couldn't wear bikinis, and it was very modest.
You had to find all your defects and polish your soul, become a better person. Help to bring in the new age.
We had meditations, we had prayers, we had exercises, we had yogas, we had disciplines.
Margie Muskimen was a veteran of San Francisco in the psychedelic 60s. She'd been hitching around Australia with her daughter when she stumbled across the Brotherhood.
In a certain sense, it was a refuge. And somehow events conspired to produce a place where, I don't know, for a moment in space and time, a lot of things came together. You felt safe.
But if life in the Brotherhood was safe and pure, the world outside was increasingly seen as dangerously corrupt.
We were terrified of going out into the world. Terrified. You know, the truck had to go out sometimes to bring in supplies, and we'd have all these meditations before the truck went out and surround the truck in a ray of, you know, in a ball of light so that the truck wouldn't get polluted by thoughts from the outside world.
TV and radio were banned. Believing they had all the answers, the Brotherhood had cut themselves off from the rest of society. With Guru Fred at the helm, they were heading into uncharted waters. Fred was a farmer who'd been bankrupted by the Great Depression. He'd been developing his own futuristic cosmic vision ever since.
Here is the central created universe. It is a spiritual universe. And these are the...
Fred believed strongly that part of the New Age message was that we were coming in contact again with the rest of the galaxy.
The Aquarian age is the age of enlightenment. Great knowledge is pouring into the world. Where from? From the space people. That is where it is coming from.
Our elder brothers were linking up with us again, those of us that could understand, and were preparing the planet for a graduation into a higher school of evolution, or a higher consciousness.
Now, the whole essence of this message to the whole world from our space brothers is this: order and harmony is being restored.
Fred used to talk about how we were raising our personal vibrations, and perhaps one day we'd even shed our physical bodies and not need them anymore and just function as etheric, spiritual beings.
He saw the world as the Titanic about to hit the iceberg.
And there'd be an increase in earthquakes, there'd be a climate change, there'd be less water, there'd be catastrophes in the world. And then eventually the UFOs would come with Christ in their flying saucers and take the people who believed in and did good things away.
And they even bought a property that had an airstrip on it so that the elder brothers would have somewhere to land and come and take us and rescue us. Now, there's only one thing more amazing than him saying that, and that's us believing it.
I'm still really ambivalent about a lot of his flying saucer message, but it was sort of part of the package of Fred. I wanted to focus on what I could work with and what I did appreciate in his message, and so that was my focus. Now, if Fred wanted to focus on other things, that was his freedom to do that.
Young Stephen now had the running of the place, under the direction of Fred's wife, Mary. Mary had married Fred in 1963. She took up his spiritual crusade and soon took charge.
Fred was never involved in the organisation. He was the prophet, giving a cosmic message. That was his job. Mary's job was to try and organise the rabble that had turned up on her front door. That's how she saw it.
She was the one who decided the rules of the place and the way everything was going to be run. And Mary's word was gospel. Mary had to be followed.
Basically, you've got to realise that it wasn't a democracy, it was a theocracy.
Power was now being concentrated in a few select hands. Mary and Stephen even created their own governing council, a small group of trusted advisors known as the Centre Core. They claimed an authority that was channeled straight from God.
Mary had her belief that she slept at night and she had dreams and God spoke to her, and we then had to follow what God had said to her.
Stephen's role was like the advisor. He was also a channel for God. We all had delusions of grandeur, but he had big ones.
And those delusions grew as the new converts just kept on coming. Within 3 years, hundreds had visited, and nearly 200 stayed.
I thought in 1972 and 73, 74 that the whole social landscape would change. I thought there would be little communities springing up all over Australia and that this was going to set the world on fire.
Even celebrities like American country music singer John Denver would fly in to visit. Meanwhile, away from the spotlight, the disciples kept up the hard work.
I wasn't there to teach, I was there to learn. And I was there to participate in a great group effort. Once a week, I'd empty every dunny in that place by hand. Would never complain. It was just, I was happy to do it, you know, because everyone had to do certain jobs and everything like that. Happy to do it.
You would have thought that Matt would be a star recruit. He was a pop singer. But remember, we'd rejected the world. So what happened out in the world didn't really mean anything to us.
The closer you were to the Centre Core, you know, the easier the life was. Stephen had quite a nice life. I don't think he ever emptied a toilet.
Because I had a friend who used to go and do the dishes for them, and I used to say, why can't they do their own dishes? Don't do them. And she used to say, but work is love. And I'd say, no, they're just lazy.
You can parallel the whole of Animal Farm to characters in the Brotherhood. It worked perfectly. I had all the names of people. I knew exactly who was who. I knew who were the cows and who were the sheep and who were the pigs. And, yeah, I was like Boxer and his donkey. I must work harder, I must work harder. And then, of course, you got the pigs and no prizes for guessing who the pigs were.
And problems would come when those people that had just arrived all of a sudden wanted to be, you know, to run the place because they saw a better way of doing it. And life doesn't work that way.
You were told, if you're feeling down or you have doubts, come and speak to the Centre Core because they're more spiritually evolved and they'll be in a position to help you. Don't speak to your peers because you'd be a negative influence on them. So when you were in doubt, you thought it was just your problem.
The ruling Centre Core were growing more controlling and hardline. They made sure everyone was pure enough for the new age by constantly scrutinising their behaviour and polishing their souls. For earnest young followers like Linda, this meant being summoned in for criticism at any time.
I remember walking to Stevens to be interviewed thinking, what was it? What have I done? What have I done? Racking my brains to wonder what I'd done wrong. And I'd get in there and it was always a shock, something that I hadn't even thought of.
When people care enough to try and tell you you've got this weakness and you've got to work on it, you say, yeah, oh, okay, and I will. And you try and say, thanks very much for thinking so much about me that I'm now polishing my soul.
Sometimes it was terribly harsh. I remember, you know, feeling it in my heart sometimes, walking out of that room just feeling, oh, just so worthless and so awful. When things like that happen to you time and time again, you really do doubt yourself. You doubt your own ability to make decisions and to do the right thing. And eventually you become powerless.
And the humiliations weren't just verbal. Linda and others were punished with menial jobs and put on silence fasts. Threatened with expulsion, they were forbidden to talk with anyone, sometimes for weeks on end.
Because the community was such a closed, nurturing nest, if you were isolated as an exercise for polishing your soul, that was pretty intense.
It sounds like we were stupid for believing all this and for swallowing it all. But the thing is, we wanted so desperately to form a new society. We wanted to be together. We wanted to fulfil this dream. And we were, little by little, willing to do anything to stay within that group. The group became our world. And to be rejected from the group would be to lose our whole identity.
Gentlemen, bow from the left, ladies from the right, ladies in the middle, dancing in the light just like a wheel within a wheel, doing the brotherhood real. They're all doing the brotherhood real.
Above all, you had to smile to be part of the brotherhood.
It can really make you feel good, doing the brotherhood real. Shuffle to the left.
There was no room in this wholesome new heaven on earth for any unhappiness.
A child died while we were there, a little baby. It was a cot death. And I was just inconsolably crying. I was crying and crying and crying, and everyone else was singing and dancing. And I was called in afterwards and told that how dare I display such emotion. This is not part of the consciousness. That child's soul had gone to God. What on earth was I crying about?
Doing the brotherhood, doing the brotherhood, doing the brotherhood.
And I ended up apologising for crying about the death of a baby.
Few dared confess to any doubt, anger or distress. Those who did were demonised and shunned.
Mary told me when I talked about the black moods I was having and the images in my head that were frightening me, Mary told me that I had been taken possession of by negative beings from the astral plane, and she isolated me from the rest of the community.
But I defied it. I found some people and I said to them, I can't go on like this any longer. I'll go crazy. So will you talk to me? And they said yes, and I'd sneak down to their caravan every night and have a chat with them. They saved my sanity.
It's like Nazi Germany. You knew what the rules were, so you just kept your mouth shut. If you lived in Soviet Russia, you didn't say Stalin's a bastard, or the next day you're out of the consciousness. You just play the game, and at that time, you know, I still completely and utterly believed in what we were doing, that we were going to, you know, build just a whole new society built on love and the love of nature and the love of each other and, you know, the whole 9 yards. And a few rules, well, that's, you know, what's it matter?
I'm so glad I'm part of this adventure.
This was going on, but at the same time, we were still having a really good time. We were still having our fun nights and our gardening and our group things and our, you know, games, and all this was still going on and we still loved it.
And people were still falling in love and getting married in the community, including young Anita. She'd become a Brotherhood celebrity after her mother kidnapped her, bringing her back to Sydney to get her deprogrammed.
I was canny enough to present well to the psychologist. The psychologist decided that I was a very well-adjusted young woman and decided that my poor mum might have some anxiety issues, where in fact she probably was right on the money. What happened then was the community banded together and raised the funds to fly me back and turned me into some sort of hero.
I now proclaim that they be man and wife together in the name of the Father, the creator of all light and life, you may now seal this spiritual contract by kissing the bride.
And from that day, I did not receive, I was not allowed to receive a letter from my mother. She tried writing letters with signing off with my dog's name so that I'd recognise them and the people filtering them wouldn't, but I was so inculcated that I actually handed them back unopened.
The Brotherhood's utopian dream was only 6 years old, but the rot was already spreading from within. In 1977, Linda was brought before the Centre Court for the last time. She'd been reported for flirting with Anita's new husband.
Linda would have obviously been informed on. Who? It doesn't matter, but it would have been someone who was sharing a secret with someone.
I really felt like I was on trial for my life. And I knew that I was going to get the death sentence. I could feel it. I could feel that behind me, about to fall. And then it came. All this stuff came. And it was the worst. It was like 5 years culmination of everything I'd ever done. And every good thing that I'd ever done was denigrated and put down and interpreted as evil. And they said, we've had a meeting. We've had a meeting with all of your friends and your family. And we put it to the vote. We don't put many things to the vote here, but we put it to the vote. And the vote was almost unanimous that you have to go. And I couldn't believe it. I said, everyone said that I should go. All your friends said that you should go.
No one wanted Linda to leave. You know, she was, as I said, just a vivacious young girl, and we needed that energy there.
And they said, you've got 24 hours to leave.
I think she might have been one of those ones where they got rid of really fast, then told everybody, oh, Linda's decided to leave. She was a bit out of the conscious. I can't remember, but that's how they would have done it.
You know, at a certain point, when someone seems to be causing a lot of difficulties, you just want to get them out of your hair, in a sense. And so out of the community hair was all that could be done.
I just came back to Sydney shell-shocked, and I knew I couldn't, there was no one I could talk to about this. I felt like a complete failure. When I look back now, I actually think I had a breakdown. I actually think I had a nervous breakdown.
Well, I remember when I was young, the world had just begun and I was happy.
Even Matt found himself in the firing line. A few months later, he was ordered to stop playing his own music. Stephen told him he could only play from Brotherhood-sanctioned songbooks.
And I'm just sitting there now saying, this is wrong, this is not what we're here for. You know, this is just power out of control, trying to control each individual, because that's what it was. If I would have said, yes, I'll learn the 1,000 songs from the... and they've got me.
Sometimes I think about it, it happens every day.
I've given everything to be a part of this, and they want to take the one thing that is truly mine and the one thing that will always be mine. And then it pretty much hit me, wait a sec. You know, if I accept this, then I'm just going to lose myself. I'm just going to turn into something I've always disliked. You know, just a mouthpiece for other people's thoughts.
Matt defied his rulers. He spoke out at the morning service.
I talked about being out of the consciousness and the whole works. I just pulled the whole thing. I just said what was happening there.
It's a huge surprise, yeah. It was a huge surprise. It felt like a a huge betrayal. That's how it felt to me as an individual at the time, that some of the people all of a sudden came out with this diatribe of things that were so terrible, and I didn't know really what they were talking about.
The genie was out of the bottle. You couldn't argue with this one. And even as the meeting finished, people were walking out saying, "Did you know that Steve came to me and he told me to do this?" "Oh, you're joking." And that I wasn't supposed to talk to you. That's why I'd been ignoring you for 3 weeks. It wasn't because I didn't... All of this stuff just started to hit the fan. All the manipulation and everything that was going on.
And it started a ripple where the only thing that happened that blew the community apart was, for the first time, people started saying to each other, "How are you feeling?"
We went to bed one night. As a community, we woke up the next morning and everything was different. It was that extreme.
And within a week, 40 of us, I think, around that number, packed up our children and our homes and left. Without a penny, nothing. We just left. We left our little caravans, we left our dreams, and we walked back into a world that we just didn't understand at all.
So I wrote on the blackboard, being the cheeky person that I am, I wrote, "God has told me to leave." And I thought, well, everyone will think that's right, they won't question me. So I got on the bus and came to Perth with my son.
And I think some of the people who were left behind must have been bewildered, because if they didn't participate in any of that few days of conversation about how are you feeling, I'm not happy, they'd have had absolutely no idea.
It was as if, you know, a magic wand had been waved and all location points had disappeared, and some people weren't able to balance in that situation.
One person was running up and down the hill with his toothbrush because he thought the elder brothers were going to come and take us now, that this was... Yeah, I think there was probably a lot of suffering for some people.
Many never recovered. Some, like Jason, wound up in hospital, needing psychiatric treatment for years to come.
I started having these intensely profound spiritual experiences, and because I experienced it so profoundly, I lost the plot. For example, I'll give, you know, whether you can really understand this or not, my physical body started spinning like a top.
Their world had crumbled, but the elder brothers in their spaceships never came. Even Fred had stopped believing in a golden future for the Universal Brotherhood.
When it collapsed, he somehow knew what was going on. He wasn't upset about what I'd done. He was thankful that someone had actually stood up to them, because he couldn't anymore. He was so marginalised by this stage. At the end, even Fred wasn't allowed to talk.
Their New Age dream was all but over. In 1983, Fred died of pneumonia. Mary persisted with her mission until her death a decade later. But the mood of the times had changed as the world woke up to the danger of religious cults.
When Jonestown happened, there was a moment where I thought, if Mary had said to us, "We've reached the right vibration, we don't need our bodies anymore, we're all going to drink cyanide," I wonder if we'd done it. I'd like to think I mightn't have, because, well, by then I'd already rebelled and left, but it scared me to realise how close to that we had come.
Oh, it could never, and I don't even think Mary was capable of that. It was on a mental level. It never would have got to physical harm. I never saw any physical harm the whole time I was there. Mental harm's just as nasty, but you can walk away from it.
We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord. We are one in the Spirit, we are
It's all changed. The cladding's changed. It's just so different, so overgrown.
It was a trauma to realise that I'd been part of bringing about a cult. It was traumatic. And there was a while there, after leaving the community, coming back into the world, as we used to call it, in which I found I was almost stuttering and I wasn't able to really to speak coherently. It was a challenging time working out how I could come back into society, having been in a pretty privileged position.
Back in suburban Sydney, Linda too is searching for resolution. Now a teacher and married with children, she's ready to look back on the 6 years of her life that till now she's kept hidden.
I left 30 years ago and I have been busy trying to forget about the Brotherhood for 30 years. And now I've decided, no, I don't want to forget, I want to remember.
You have more fun.
So Linda's planning a reunion at her place.
Addresses.
A last chance to heal old wounds.
And I'm hoping that a lot of other people will be keen to come and join the reunion and discuss old times, learn about where each of us has gone in the last 30 years and see what we've gained from the experience.
Anita, will you take Duncan's hand and affirm after me?
For Anita, now a Brisbane health worker, news of the upcoming reunion has brought back emotions she thought she'd long since left behind.
My marriage exploded apart after leaving the Brotherhood. I just didn't know what to believe anymore. I was frightened. I was either mad or going to go mad. When I was first asked if I'd come to the reunion, I threw the letter out. And then a number of people rang and said, we would really love it if you came. And I became curious about my level of anger and realised that maybe I hadn't worked through my reactions to the Brotherhood at all. And in fact, began to realise that I had simply, as a 19-year-old, buried it.
I went to the Universal Brotherhood to find God, to find out how this universe works. I went there to find the truth, and I found me.
We talked of life in 78. Sure, there were hard times, others were great. We made mistakes, it was a learning time. Possibility still remains.
Like many other ex-devotees, Matt Taylor simply slammed the door on his Brotherhood days and threw himself back into his music. For him, like the others, this reunion will be his first meeting with his former brothers and sisters since it all fell apart.
If you hold grudges, you only hurt yourself, you're not hurting anybody else. And I think I will see him and we'll have a nice conversation and have a bit of a laugh. I'd like to meet that Stephen who I first met with Fred, who hired the Maya Bowl.
Gosh, you look exactly the same. Look at you. No. Oh, wow. And she gorgeous?
Oh, sorry, you. Look at you. You were a little girl when I knew you.
I was, I know.
I brought a diary with me.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I kept diaries when we...
That's so good.
When we first...
Susan's come all the way to Sydney from Perth to make sure this reunion finally calls Stephen to account.
You should have known. Why didn't you just turn around and run there and
I
then...
should have, yes, I know. I was idealistic, yeah.
So now you're walking with a stick, are you? But it's amazing he wouldn't, because he was fairly level-headed, really, compared to her.
Look, hello, Matt!
Terrific. Still got the big red hair.
Still got the hair.
It helps a lot.
Yeah, look at you. Fantastic.
But of all of them, Stephen has the most at stake. Susan's outburst at bailing up took him by surprise, and he's preparing for more of the same tonight.
I'm turning embarrassment into an art form in a lot of ways. It's sort of very strange because I'm not the same person as I was then, but it still is important. It did shape me. It did shape my life. And I have to admit that. I think it's much better to have these things out and being talked about than there to be smoulderings still from that time. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, I'm sure this is it.
The party's already underway at Linda's, and Stephen knows 50 of his former followers are waiting inside.
Hey, Linda. Hello. Hello. Well, look at Lily. Look at you, you gorgeous thing. Aren't you beautiful? You look at Lily and
Yeah, you can't keep me away.
This is amazing. Hi, Susan.
How are you going? Yes.
Rosie.
Yes.
Having yourself.
Wow.
Good on you, Jason. Crack the eyes.
Good to see you.
You'll be even more stunned the more you walk through there.
It's amazing.
How are you?
Good.
I don't know whether to hug you or not.
You can. It's all right.
Okay, I just want to say welcome everybody to my home. It's fantastic that you've come all this way from...
The formalities are soon over. The time has come to answer for the past.
Personally, I want to apologise for my own fanaticism, something I now see as born out of a sincere but misguided enthusiasm for the project we are undertaking. The line between enthusiasm and fanaticism can be thin, and I believe I crossed that line too often. And that's one of the saddest things for me, is that in my enthusiasm, I tried to interfere with people's personal decision-making process. To be too much involved and snooping into others' private lives was not helpful. Fred did not have beliefs, as we know, just truths. But many of those... and Mary, you know, really was a mixed-up mystic in many ways. But she was sincere. And she was my teacher for many years. And so I don't want to just demonise the person that I spent... Yeah. So that's that.
I think, you know, Stephen's more a victim of this than anyone, because he just gave himself to her completely. And he started doing her dirty work. And when he's lost his temper, that's the little part of Stephen saying, I want to come back. No, you're not. OK, be more harsh.
I could see how there were people in the community down at Bailing Up who were spoilt, protected, had servants, played these power games, got people to shut up by silence fast, banned from the community. Vern wasn't allowed to communicate with his family. People went crazy. and they were dumped in the psychiatric department. Dr. Jones got yet another one. If I could see that...
And suicides.
And attempted suicides, apparently. How come you couldn't see it? Why didn't you see it the way I saw it?
Because I wasn't you. I was me. And I was obviously misguided in many ways. And there's no real but. That's enough.
Well, I have to feel sorry for you then. I have to find compassion in my heart for you, because you hurt a lot of people.
I'd appreciate that. I would appreciate it. Thanks, Susan.
Richie, and you didn't respond.
I've changed my name, but I still respond to Richie.
No, look.
See, most people don't realise that we actually like each other. Hey.
I'm tempted to put my arm around you, Susan, but I won't do that.
I'm trying to be forgiving. He's not to blame for everything that happened. We're a bunch of young kids who were trying to find an ideal lifestyle and a way forward, and we were clumsy. And everyone was trying to do their best. And we stumbled and we fumbled along the way, and we did some stupid things, and we had some great times.
Good people can do some terrible things. In fact, people who think they're morally superior or good or better than others can treat the others despicably, as we saw.
He's admitted to me that he was Mary's henchman, that he outworked things that he shouldn't have done, that he made terrible mistakes against people's freedom of choice and all this sort of thing. He's admitted to all that. What more can he do? Stephen's selling roses. He's no big deal anymore. You can't change the past. He's not going to do it again.
Look, selling is selling. I've sold insurance. I've sold financial advice. Since I was selling religious, my religious wares in the community. And so selling roses is much the same in a way. I think if I could sell Fred Robinson, I could sell roses. La Rosa? No?
No, we love it.
Yeah? All right. You have two? What would you like? With the teddy and the chocolate?
Don't worry, no, just...
The plain rose. Two red ones? Rose 21 here? You have a good night anyway. Do you bring him out often? You have a good night. Does not look promising, this table. You have a good night. But I've been wrong before.
We'll have one of those. Yeah.
That one there?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm not in the good books.
Oh, yeah, but you could be. How much are they? Depends what you want. These ones. Rose for anyone here?